That moment in the hallway told me this wasn't about budgets. My name is Adam. I'm 37 years old and I live in Denver. Monday morning, I walked into Darren's office thinking we were finally going to have the talk. Not some vague feedback session, not a status update. The talk about my raise. I'd earned it. 5 years building the logistics platform from the ground up, expanding it across 7 countries, streamlining our supply chains so tight, we landed a $62 million contract last quarter. I had the numbers printed, charts, comparisons, full breakdowns. Darren was new, 3 weeks into the CEO role. Private equity guy, slick haircut, expensive smile, handshake, like a guy who reads articles about dominance in business meetings. He grinned like we were closing on a used Lexus. "Adam, what can I do for you?" he said, leaning back in his chair like we were about to shoot the breeze. "I wanted to talk about compensation," I said, keeping it direct. "We've crossed a lot of major milestones. Revenue, platform deployment, and that new Brazil integration all came out of my pipeline. This is a good time to revisit my package." He nodded like he was hearing a pitch at a trade show. "No question, you've been integral. Really impressive work." I waited. He didn't continue, just stared at me with that studied, practiced look. "I'd like to propose a revision," I went on. "Base bump, performance bonus tied to Q targets, and equity adjustment. The numbers reflect what I've delivered." His smile tightened. "Look, Adam, I won't dance around it. There's a freeze right now." My heart dropped a few inches. "A freeze?" He gave this slow, sympathetic head tilt like I had cancer. "Just during this organizational realignment, you know how it is. The board wants to evaluate everything top-down before we make comp decisions." I nodded, but only to keep from throwing the binder across the room. "Realignment," I repeated. "Not performance-based," he said quickly. "This isn't about you, it's just timing." I thanked him, don't ask me why, and left his office with my jaw clenched so tight I could have cracked a molar. And then I saw it. Walking back toward the floor, I passed the war room, that giant wall-to-wall board we all used to map system architecture, and there it was, printed clean on the new schematic. My architecture. The foundation of our global supply system. Only now, it had someone else's name on it, Jason Miller, his name printed in bold font at the top corner, like he'd masterminded the whole thing. I stared at it for a few seconds, just long enough to feel the sweat crawl down the back of my neck. No one noticed me, or maybe they did and looked away. That moment told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about budgets. This wasn't a freeze. They were erasing me, starting with my name. They handed him the throne and gave me a folding chair in the back. The calendar invite came in at 9:07 p.m. Monday night. Subject line, realignment discussion, no agenda. 15 minutes blocked, sent by Darren's assistant. No CC. Just me. Tuesday 10:30 sharp. I stared at it for a few seconds before hitting. Except I already knew what it meant. You don't get summoned like that unless something's being carved off you. Still, I showed up on time. Darren's door was already open. He didn't stand, didn't shake my hand. His laptop was closed, pen resting diagonally across a legal pad, like he was about to write me a check. He motioned toward the chair in front of him, like a waiter seating someone late for their reservation. "Adam," he said, with that same professional brightness he'd used the day before. "Thanks for coming." I sat. He didn't ask how I was doing, he just folded his hands. "I'll get right to it," he said. "As you know, we're undergoing a strategic realignment across all verticals." There it was. That word again. Realignment, like they were moving furniture, not people. "We're repositioning key personnel to better match their profiles to organizational priorities," he continued, carefully reading from a page I wasn't allowed to see. "You're being reassigned," he said, like he was announcing a weather update. "Effective immediately, you'll hold the title of Senior Technical Advisor." I blinked once. "To Jason?" I asked. He gave a slow nod. "Yes. Jason will be stepping into a leadership role, head of systems architecture." My tongue hit the back of my teeth. I said nothing. Darren kept going. "You'll be a key voice, of course. Strategic guidance, legacy insights. We see tremendous value in your domain knowledge." "Right. value.legacy. I was being buried with a plaque. This isn't a reflection of performance, he said quickly, sensing the tension. It's about profile fit. Jason has a background in cross-functional rollout. He aligns better with the current stage of growth. Bullshit. Jason once crashed our dev server trying to manually hot swap a config file. This was the same guy who used to forward me architecture questions with thoughts in the body and no subject line. The kind of guy who spells redundant with an E and once called Kafka that messaging thing. And now he was my boss. I didn't say a word. I just stood, nodded like a professional, and walked out. The office outside was its usual hum. Sales guys half standing during calls, operations staring at dual monitors, someone heating fish in the break room like it was a war crime. I sat back down at my desk, numb, and opened Outlook. Sods. Top of the inbox. Announcement. Please welcome Jason Miller, Head of Architecture. Sent company-wide. Banner image of Jason in a blazer 2 sizes too tight, smiling like a guy who just won the lottery with numbers he didn't pick. Below that, a short message from Darren. Jason will be leading key technical evolution efforts as part of our growth plan. Please join us in congratulating him. Attached to the email, Jason's vision deck, a slideshow explaining the future of our logistics platform. I opened it. Slide 1, buzzwords. Slide 2, diagrams. Slide 3, my architecture layout, line for line, with the new header, JMS 2023 framework. My file name was still in the corner. They hadn't even re-exported the slides. I sat there for a long time, didn't speak, didn't fume, just got very, very quiet. They took my title, gave it to the guy who once unplugged the load balancer during a team demo, and then had the gall to use my slides to justify it. The crown was gone, the chair was folding, but the foundation, still mine. And they had no idea what they'd just handed back to me. They erased me, but left my code. Their system still ran on my bones. The Q2 kickoff was a production, not a meeting, a show. They booked the big auditorium downtown. Lights, AV team, branded coffee sleeves. One of those things they spin as culture while quietly massaging your paycheck down. I sat halfway back, 2 rows behind the commercial analytics team, next to a guy I'd onboarded last fall who now pretended not to know me. My badge clipped to my belt, no title on the lanyard, just a seat. Jason, on the other hand, sat up front. Blue suit, fresh haircut, new shoes, the whole package. He was flanked by a couple product managers I didn't recognize, and one of the new guys from strategy, the one who always says net like it means something. The lights dimmed, Darren took the stage like a game show host. Welcome everyone, Q2 is here, and we're coming off a historic quarter. Polite applause. He launched into a warm-up routine about momentum, strategy, customer-centric vision, the usual buzzword bingo. I barely listened. My mind was looping the same thought over and over. They really did it. They really gave it to him. Then Darren clicked to slide 24. And now, he said, smiling wide, I want to take a moment to recognize someone who made our KPI system transformation possible. My chest went tight. For a split second, I let myself believe it. Maybe Darren had a change of heart. Maybe he saw the commit logs. Maybe he read my report and realized belatedly that he'd promoted a mascot. Then he said it. Let's give it up for Jason Miller. The room clapped. I didn't. My hand stayed in my lap. Jason stood, walked up like he was receiving a Nobel. He turned to face the audience, hands in his pockets, confident like he'd actually earned it. Darren laid it on thick. Jason has completely reshaped the way we approach performance metrics. His vision for a dynamic KPI dashboard, his words, not mine, has already improved internal transparency across 4 regions. I watched as the screen behind them cycled through slides. My dashboards, my queries, even the file name in the corner, add logix vv2 metrics.kz, still there in tiny font. The AV guy hadn't even cropped it out. They showed the predictive view I wrote during that 3 a.m. patch last November, the one that saved Brazil from crashing during the holiday surge. Jason gestured toward it like he'd discovered gravity. People around me nodded, some clapped again. Nobody looked confused, nobody looked twice at the corner. After the session, an email blast hit my inbox. Subject: Congratulations, Jason. I didn't open it, I didn't need to. The banner image had one of my dashboards in the background, a heat map I'd spent a week tuning for drift detection. Now it was a backdrop to Jason's LinkedIn-ready smile. I didn't yell, didn't slam my desk, or fire off an email to Darren. I just got very, very quiet. Because in that moment, I realized something. They could take my title. They could airbrush my name off the architecture. They could even let some clown in a tailored jacket take credit for the system I bled into. But they couldn't change the foundation. They erased me from the stage, but every chart, every alert, every dashboard they showed that day still ran on my code. They handed Jason the microphone, but he was standing on my stage. They thought I was obsolete. I was their power supply. Wednesday morning, I was in before the lights. 12 a.m. No badge scans in the log before mine, just the hum of the floor servers kicking on, the AC ducts rattling in the ceiling, and the ghost of my own breath in the hallway. I didn't go to my desk. I went straight to the war room, dimmed the lights, and fired up the admin console on the old build terminal, the one they hadn't replaced because nobody knew how it was wired into the legacy VPN. Except me. They'd renamed things. That was the first layer of paint. Slide decks called it Miller Flow now. The old project folder was rebranded as Old Infrastructure, Yes Vision, 2023. Pretty charts, fresh font, new color palettes. But once I tunneled past the front end and hit the actual guts, it was all still mine. The core logic hadn't been touched. Not really. They'd changed variable names, moved labels around. Jason had swapped out some display modules and added his initials to a few file names, like a kid carving his name into a park bench. But the logic engine, the real heart, was untouched. I dug deeper, found an old patch I'd slipped in 2 years ago to stabilize time zone desync across Brazil and Spain nodes. It wasn't even documented, no comment tags, just a string of corrections buried under a nonsense header. A trick I used to keep low-level hacks from being overwritten during sync pushes, still there. Then I found the engine, the real gem. Our predictive modeling backbone, still running on NutriCore. I'd licensed it myself, back when legal dragged their feet and procurement didn't want to spring for an enterprise solution, paid out of pocket. One-time fee. Private developer license. Tied to my name, not the company's, not theirs. They never transitioned it, never swapped it out. They didn't even register the dependency in the new documentation. I pulled up the license dashboard, still active, still privately held. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just sat there and watched the pulse log scroll. They'd built a castle on top of an engine they didn't own, a system they didn't understand, and they handed the keys to a guy who thought fault tolerance was a buzzword you say in meetings. They thought I was gone, but my name was still buried in the bones, not on the decks, not on the board, but in the code, in the way it pulsed, in the way it balanced out faulty input, in the way it adjusted for unseen drift. I started mapping it all, quietly. Thoroughly. Logic forks, commit histories, failover triggers, timestamp anomalies. Every breadcrumb I'd left behind while they were busy printing Jason's face on foam core posters. No one noticed. Nobody asked what I was doing in the war room at dawn. I was obsolete, remember? Reassigned. Background noise. That's what made it perfect. They'd taken the crown, but they forgot to change the locks. They loved the look of it, just didn't realize what they were chewing on. I didn't torch the system. That would have been too obvious, too fast, and honestly, too satisfying, which meant they'd know it was me. Instead, I started small. Quiet. Surgical. Week by week, I rewrote logic in ways that looked like enhancements but functioned like decay, things that passed code review, if anyone had bothered to look, but nobody did. Why would they? Jason was busy basking in LinkedIn likes, and Darren was too busy scaling vision. The dashboard still looked great. That was the point. I left the surface pretty, but underneath I pulled out key dependencies, forecasting scripts that once used 10 input streams now used 4, Alert parameters, which used to ping on deviations over 2%, now waited for a cozy 11% spread. The visualizations stayed clean, KPIs looked crisp, but accuracy was bleeding quietly into the floor. At first, it didn't matter. The system still functioned. Orders still moved. But I knew what would happen. I built it. I knew which pipes fed into which valves, and how long it would take before the leak flooded the basement. By the second week, predictive alerts were hitting 3 hours late. By the fourth, SKU drift was up 9% in Germany, and no one caught it. A whole South American reorder batch got routed to the wrong fulfillment center. Their system, my system, made the numbers glow. But they didn't mean anything anymore. Jason didn't notice. He thought the green bars on the monthly review meant things were better than ever. He actually said that out loud. This is the smoothest quarter we've ever had. Look at these metrics. I was in the back of the room, watching him click through a PowerPoint full of hollow stats like a man praising a wax fruit basket. Darren nodded along like he'd just discovered electricity. These are unmatched performance levels. Jason, this is game-changing. Game-changing, that was the word they used. And I sat there with my hands folded, watching the whole room sip on poisoned sugar water like it was the fountain of youth. What none of them realized was that I wasn't breaking anything. Not really. I wasn't deleting. I wasn't injecting chaos. I was letting the logic rot, beautifully. A slow, fragrant death. Every green light on the dashboard bought them one more day of false confidence. They thought they were winning. They thought they were brilliant, and that's what made it delicious, because by the time they noticed something was off, it'd be far too late to trace it back to me. All I had to do was wait. First client flagged the drift. My silence was almost over. Jason's voice echoed off the glass walls of the small conference room. Forecast accuracy, 98.6%. The slide on screen showed a green line climbing just above target. A few heads nodded around the room. I didn't. I sat 3 chairs back, half hidden behind a fake ficus, arms folded. 98.6%? That was fiction. The kind you print when the formulas are missing half their inputs and the alert system's been lobotomized. By week 4, we were drifting at 12%, and that was being generous. Demand misalignment, missed reorder triggers, overnight shipments going out for items we used to stock in advance. But as long as the dashboard said green, nobody questioned a damn thing. They were patting each other's backs over a bonfire I'd set politely aflame. Later that day, I got a LinkedIn ping from an old client, Northbridge Health. We'd built their regional forecast stack 3 years ago. Real high-volume stuff. Surgical supplies, pharma logistics. Not the kind of place where a late shipment gets forgiven easily. The message was short. Hey, is the system still yours? That was it. No emojis, no soft phrasing, just the question. Is it still yours? I didn't reply. Not yet, but I stared at it for a long time, saved it to my archive like a bullet in the chamber, because I knew what it meant. Somewhere in their boardroom, someone at Northbridge was already picking up on the cracks. They were starting to see delays, inaccurate restock windows, inventory that looked fine in the system but didn't actually exist on the floor. And they remembered me. They remembered who built the thing when it worked. Jason? He was too busy planning his next vision talk for the partner offsite in Aspen. He didn't even know the warning bells were starting to ring. I did. That message told me the quiet part out loud. The part I'd been waiting to hear from someone outside the building. Something's wrong, and we think you're still the one who understands it. That night, I stayed late, not to code, just to reread that message and remind myself what real leverage looked like. The metrics said Jason was a genius. But the clients, they were starting to ask about me. They finally noticed cracks. But it was already too late. It was a Tuesday 2 weeks after the Northbridge ping when I stopped by Meredith's pod. She was one of the newer analysts, smart, young, eager. The kind of person who still believed in cross-functional synergy and posted book summaries on Slack. I figured maybe, just maybe, someone like her had noticed the anomalies I'd left flickering behind the curtain. Hey, I said, leaning against the wall. You seeing anything weird in the forecast logic lately? Some of the variances are looking off. She looked up with this polite little smile, like I was somebody's uncle visiting from another floor. Oh, yeah, she said, dragging out the words. But it's not really your thing anymore, is it? That landed harder than I expected. Not cruel, just honest in the worst way. I gave her a nod, backed off, and walked out without saying anything else. That stung more than Jason's dumb grin ever could. Because she was right. That's how they saw me now. Not the builder, not the architect, just some guy they reassigned like an old printer. Legacy hardware, the kind of person you loop in just for background. Hours later, I got the alert. Northbridge, a full shipment delay, 26 pallets, never flagged. The predictive model didn't catch the shortfall. The fallback triggers never fired. The alert system didn't even blink. The only reason I saw it? I'd left a ghost patch deep in the license call logs to notify me anytime Northbridge failed to sync. By the end of the day, it was confirmed. The whole order was botched. And just like that, their $8.2 million renewal vanished. Poof. Wednesday morning, Darren walked in, stiff as rebar. Jason trailed him with that dazed look of someone who just got yelled at in a language they don't speak. An hour later, a new name showed up on the meeting roster, Ken Albright from Norcross Solutions. Outside firm, gray hair. Reputation for coming in when things were unclear. They brought him in to audit the core. Ken spent a day and a half going through what was left of the system's spine. I passed him once by the whiteboard. He nodded but didn't ask anything, just stared at the scribbles like a detective looking at a murder scene missing half the blood spatter. Thursday afternoon, he sat in the war room with Jason. No Darren, no deck. Just silence, 2 laptops, and a whiteboard full of incomplete diagrams. I wasn't in the room, but I saw Jason afterward. He came out pale, jaw tight, no eye contact. Ken followed behind him, holding a printout, the system trace logs. The ones I knew didn't make sense anymore. He looked at me in the hallway, just a flicker of recognition, then back at his sheet. He didn't say it, didn't have to, but I saw it written all over his face. She's not here anymore, meaning the system, the one that used to hum like a tuned engine, the one I built piece by invisible piece. It was gone. What was left? A bunch of duct-taped widgets with Jason's initials in the headers and no soul underneath. Ken raised one eyebrow at me, just a flicker, not a smile, but enough. That was the moment I knew. They were starting to get it, but not fast enough to stop what was already in motion. My voice wasn't in the room, but my system still was. It was the first Monday of the new quarter, 8:30 a.m. sharp, the kind of meeting where the coffee's too strong and everyone's overdressed. Boardroom full of smiles and strategy. Jason stood at the head of the table, clicking through his Q3 performance deck. Charts everywhere, growth arrows, conversion rates, fulfillment accuracy. Whatever buzz metrics Darren needed to keep investors calm, I wasn't invited, didn't need to be, because my code was. Slide 3 came up, a clean graph, simple KPI trend line. Executives leaned in. Jason kept talking about predictive uplift and efficiency thresholds, like he knew what either of those meant. And then it happened. Bottom corner of the slide, barely visible, white text on light gray, the message I'd planted 2 weeks earlier. The numbers are optimized, not real. Ask who changed the core. Jason didn't see it at first. Nobody did. Then one of the board members squinted and leaned forward. Wait, what does that say down there? Jason paused mid-sentence, confused. Clicked back, froze. Someone else read it aloud. Ask who changed the core. The room fell quiet. Who the hell is Adam? One of them asked. Jason's hand hovered over the laptop. He looked like a man trying to explain a fire alarm he didn't hear. Go off, another director pulled out their phone. Within seconds, emails started pinging. The raw report, the version that went to the directors after each quarterly deck, had the same message embedded in the metadata. Plain text. Not sabotage, just a quiet footnote. From me. Compliance emailed me within the hour. Subject line. Following up on report discrepancies. Are you available today? I replied with one word. Yes. Jason had taken my title, my credit, my seat in the hierarchy. But the system, still mine. And now the board knew there were questions he couldn't answer. They didn't hear my voice in that room, but they finally heard the truth whispering through the code. That wasn't a resignation. That was a transfer of power. They called the meeting for 10 a.m., 11th floor, executive boardroom, full glass, long table, the kind of place where you're not allowed to bring coffee unless it's in a branded ceramic mug. I showed up at 9:57 with my laptop under my arm and a folder of printouts in my other hand. No greetings, no handshakes. Darren was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the nervous tick in his jaw clenching hard. Jason sat 2 seats down, pale, scrolling his phone like he might find salvation in a Slack thread. Across from them sat a rep from Northbridge Health, gray suit, silver watch, stern face. Her name was Lisa Danton. We'd met twice before. She didn't nod when I walked in, just gave a single glance that said, "I know." I plugged in my laptop, opened the lid, and cast the screen to the room. No preamble, no warm-up. Slide 1. Original core architecture, my version. Labeled, annotated, time-stamped. Slide 2. Current logic, modified under Jason's credentials. Slide 3. Error deltas, system drift. Predictive failures, the whole picture, side by side. I clicked through without commentary. 4th slide. Alert suppression logs. 5th. Delay chains by region. 6th. Commit history showing exactly when Jason started pushing bad edits to the core. Each of these entries corresponds to a variable being stripped, or an alert condition being loosened, I said, voice flat. This one here disabled a check that used to catch overstock divergence. Nobody interrupted. I looked straight at Lisa. The failure at Northbridge wasn't a blip. It was the natural outcome of what the system became once it was no longer mine. She didn't blink. I have a license log for NutriCore, I continued. Still active, still private. No corporate handoff. The predictive engine you're all still leaning on, it's running under a license tied to my name. Darren shifted in his seat. Adam, I cut him off with the next slide. My email exchange with NutriCore support from 3 years ago. Personal payment. No reimbursement. Non-transferable license clause highlighted in yellow. Jason still hadn't spoken. Lisa stood. "We're pulling out," she said clearly to Darren. His eyes widened. "Wait, from the contract?" "From the company," she clarified. "Not the system. We'll be hiring Adam directly." You could hear a pin drop. Darren opened his mouth, then shut it. Blinked like someone waking up in a burning house. Jason looked down at his hands. Didn't say a word. I unplugged my laptop, closed the lid, and tucked it back under my arm. "I'll forward compliance my files," I said, standing. Nobody stopped me. I walked out without a handshake, without a nod, without 1 ounce of regret. They gave Jason my job. I took their clients.